The Karen Reed trial ends in a mistrial? Really?
What a waste of resources.
Did the jury really not come to a verdict?
What's up with that?
In a shocking end to the Karen Reed trial, the jury could not come to a decision. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And today we have attorney Yoli and intern Red with us. How are you guys doing today?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having me again.
So, what the heck happened? There was a lot of strong feelings, and if you're in the New England area, people seem to either feel really strongly one way or really strongly the other way. And with all the discourse happening online, we're actually coming to see is like the jury wasn't even able to come to a decision as to whether or not she was guilty. And I think that makes sense because we were seeing what was happening with Proctor and, some inappropriate behavior going on in the investigation. But after 20 hours of deliberation, they couldn't come to a conclusion. And now it's going to be a mistrial and they're retrialing it. It's all over the place.
And the first thing that happened was Trooper Proctor was, I say he was fired. They say they relieved him of his duty, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. It was really a shock. I mean, they had come out on a Friday and said, we can't reach a verdict. The judge sends them back over the weekend. They come back and everybody thought maybe after the weekend they would, come to some kind of a verdict, but they came back, and here is what happened in court when they just could not reach consensus.
I am in receipt of your note. Judge Cannoni, despite our rigorous efforts, we continue to find ourselves at an impasse. Our perspectives on the evidence are starkly divided. Some members of the jury firmly believe that the evidence surpasses the burden of proof, establishing the elements of the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. Conversely, others find the evidence fails to meet this standard and does not sufficiently establish the necessary elements of the charges. The deep division is not due to a lack of effort or diligence, but rather a sincere adherence to our individual principles and moral convictions. To continue to deliberate would be futile and only serve to force us to compromise these deeply held beliefs. I'm not going to do that to you folks. Your service is complete. I'm declaring a mistrial in this case. I'll be in to see you privately in a few minutes. So thank you so much for your service. Okay.
All rise for the court, please.
And that was it. That was the day. And then the parties left the court, and that was it.
I can't even imagine. It's like, can you, we sit here and we talk on our podcast for like an hour most weeks, and maybe we'll do a couple episodes, but it's just like we're pooped after discussing for like an hour, and these people have 20 hours. That's like half a work week. Imagine if these people are probably sitting there wishing they were at their desk job.
And we don't get to know the breakdown of who was not guilty and who was guilty. We don't
Not
get
yet.
to know the
Not yet. No.
Oh.
I'm going to guess it'll come out. But I'm trying to look ahead right after the judge declared a mistrial. She said, all right, we got the Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey declared that he is going to retry the case. And there's really no doubt about that unless something unforeseen happens. He's the kind of a guy that when he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. And so they scheduled another court hearing on July 22nd where they're going to figure out what's going to happen. But the court rules in Massachusetts require that if they're going to retry the case, they've got to do it within a year. Here's the text of the Massachusetts Rules of Criminal Procedure rule. Are you taking notes, Yoli? Rule 36. No. Wow.
But I'll remember it. Okay.
36B1D, and it says if a retrial of the defendant is ordered, the trial shall commence within 1 year after the date the action occasioning the retrial becomes final as extended by subdivision B2 of this rule. So the action that required the retrial was the declaration of a mistrial because of what they call a hung jury. So that's the rule, and that's what it says. And so it's hard to believe that, they will actually go through the whole process of retrying the case. I mean, what an expense.
Yeah, I think if it's going to be for the same charges, I think they're going to run into the same issue. My only thought that could benefit them with the mistrial is that because everybody involved, this is like their first experience with so much exposure to the media and stuff. Like we saw like Turtle Boy even coming up in witness statements. So I think that I think it's going to be very silly to try to retrial this if we're doing the same charges, because I think that it's going to be very difficult to find a group of people that doesn't feel as divided. I was actually shocked in some of the stuff that I was reading. It kind of seemed to imply that there might have been more than one person that was kind of against it. So like you said, we don't know yet.
Not yet.
But I mean, it's like, the way that I think about it is like, in this case, because you have a lot of people who feel very strongly that law enforcement, they are the ultimate right, and that it's not a gray area, and that they're gonna always side with law enforcement. And then you have other people who are super anti-law enforcement and are always against it. I think about something that people are gonna feel so intensely for, where, like you said, it's like they're just like, we've gone at it for 20 hours, nothing's moving. I don't know if they're ever gonna find a jury that doesn't feel that strongly.
Well, that's the jury selection process, and I don't know how it goes in California, but I know they do spend a lot of time. Not as much in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, which I'm familiar with, as they do in California. I know, Yoli, they spend a lot more time in California on jury selection, but I think that they try to screen out those biases. They try and screen out pro and anti law enforcement. I mean, if any members of law enforcement are in the prospective jury, the attorneys are able to strike them for cause if they want to, or they can call them up and ask them questions. But one of the things that was crazy about this case, guys, do you remember Michael Proctor? Do you remember his testimony?
Terrible. Yes.
Well, so one of the first things that happened after the verdict was he was fired. The Massachusetts State Police fired the lead investigator, Michael Proctor. Here was a statement that was released not long after the trial. The department, meaning the Massachusetts State Police, took immediate action to relieve Trooper Michael Proctor of duty and formally transfer him out of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office State Police Detectives Unit. This follows our previous decision to open an internal affairs investigation after information about serious misconduct emerged in testimony at the trial. This investigation is ongoing, so it didn't take them long.
No, and I'm wondering if in the retrial, does this information get to come into the trial as evidence?
That's what I was wondering too, if he's going to be another witness again.
Those are all good questions. I mean, I can only guess. I don't think that the prosecutor, Adam Lally, wanted to bring him in. Do you remember earlier in the trial, he was trying to get as much evidence in through the other state police. I think it was Detective Buchanek. He was getting as much evidence in through him as he could possibly get in, because there were actual legitimate questions as to whether they were going to get Michael Proctor in, because he's such he was bad merchandise, and he certainly tainted the case. I heard one attorney who's very well known in the Boston area say that he felt that the trial was over on that day. Now, in retrospect, he was wrong, but he felt that, I mean, imagine if you're a woman jurist and you hear the stuff that he said about Karen Reed, which we're going to get to in a few minutes, but that you hear that stuff. I mean, so that's a good question. Will they get the evidence in through someone else? I mean, Yoli, how could they present such a damaged police investigator who's been fired?
And
I
that's,
mean,
they get to cross-examine him on that, I would imagine, because he got fired for his conduct, well, testifying as to his conduct in the investigation. That's what I understand. That, yeah. So his conduct in the investigation has caused him to be disciplined. And so I think that Karen Reed's attorneys will be able to cross-examine him on that point. I mean, I believe so, because it's relevant to her defense. If he was so jaded and so biased and so awful and wanted her to kill herself, I mean, that's huge.
it is huge.
Does he have the option, like, can he say no to coming back as a witness at all, or no?
I wouldn't think they'd want him back. I would,
That's what I think.
if I was Adam Lally, I wouldn't want him back. I mean, if they call him back, that's a good question. If they call him back, could he say no? Well, I mean, I would imagine that's in his contract somewhere. I'm not sure. So
no,
back
I was
up to
just saying. Yeah, I was just saying that I'm curious if we're ever going to hear about anything happening to his boss, who he's texting that was looking for the nudes to, or if we're just going to sweep that one under the rug and just yeah, we got rid of him. Don't worry about it. We're just not going to do anything about his superior that didn't do any disciplinary action in that moment. Like,
I mean,
Well,
if
there should be-
if he's subpoenaed to testify, I would think he has to. But I mean, I don't know if there's anything in a contract, like you said, Andrew. That
I don't know. I mean, if I were the Massachusetts State Police, I would put him on a boat to some country that has no extradition and say bye bye, see you later. But Massachusetts has such a big history of being corrupt, and I don't mind saying that. I've watched some other creators kind of, run a circle around that. But Massachusetts has such a history of corrupt state police, and I don't mind saying it, and I'll say it again later in this podcast that I don't think that is strange to any of the jurors. And it would seem to me that some kind of investigation, some kind of changes, some overall changes need to be made after this. During the trial, the same day that Mr. Proctor had testified, Governor Morrissey made some very guarded comments and pointed out where there's an investigation going and I can't comment, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, now would be the time for the governor, who, by the way, is a former attorney general of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to act, to do something. But so going forward, are they really going to retry this case? I mean, millions have been spent, days and days and days. And Judge Canoni kept saying, well, I have other cases. I'm busy. I mean, one week of the trial, they only had one trial day. It was a 5-day work week, and they only tried the case one day. So I'm thinking of alternatives. And I don't know if we didn't really discuss this, Yoli, but one of the alternatives I would think, and I don't know if it's a good alternative, to be honest with you, but one of the alternatives that would, when things like this happen, is that prosecutors say, well, let's offer a plea bargain. What were the charges against Karen Reed? There was second-degree murder. There was motor vehicle manslaughter while driving under the influence. There was leaving the scene of a collision causing death. So maybe we'll offer her the opportunity to take a plea on one of the charges and drop the other two and, just be done with it. My read of Attorney Yannetti and Attorney Jackson is that idea would be DOA. What do you think, Yoli?
Well, I think it would, but we don't know what's going through Karen Reed's mind either. I mean, she may feel, to go through this again. I mean, it's almost like it's such a big thing that it takes so much out of your life. And then it seems like the prosecution, what they did was they took so long with their case. It was like making it seem like they had so much evidence. And when in reality, the evidence was kind of, well, at least what I saw, one of the experts and Proctor and some of the other witnesses, McCabe, it seemed weak to me. But, I think they just piled on the evidence. And if it's going to go that long, I mean, what is she going to do? I mean, I know there's a fund for her fees, but she has to pay that again. I mean,
yeah, because David Yannetti, no slur on him. He's an extremely experienced Boston defense attorney. But Alan Jackson came in from Los Angeles. He flew in from your neck of the woods. He flew over here 3,000 miles, and he was here for all those weeks. Plus, the weeks of the trial are only a small view of the whole thing. The trial preparation, the advance work, and all of that. I mean, I guess with Zoom, and all that good stuff. That's John O'Keefe's mother, by the way, who openly wept in court after the verdict was read. I mean, there's just no finality to the thing for John O'Keefe's mother, who we see there. But anyhow, as I was saying, so defense attorney Alan Jackson flew in from across the country, and my understanding is that Karen Reed's family, is well-to-do. But how long can even a well-to-do family afford to pay those legals? So I mean, if the Commonwealth offered to drop the second-degree murder, which wasn't on the table in the original indictment anyhow, and offer a plea to one of the lower charges. I mean, I'm just thinking. That's all I'm doing. People that work with me say I think out loud all the time, and sometimes it's a crazy idea. But they could offer her, take second degree off the table, offer her one of the other charges, give her a sentence, suspend it, or suspend all but some of it. That these are things that can be done. Whether it's done in this case, I really don't know.
And the prosecution, Oh, go ahead, Brett.
I don't think that's really fair. I think that her team did a really good job. They kind of proved her innocence, and to throw a charge at her because their case didn't go well, that's kind of messed up.
No, but the alternative is trying the whole thing all over again. That's even more messed up, don't you think?
Yeah, but out of the two, I think that she would win the case if she tried again, and I think she knows that too.
Yeah.
You never know what a jury is going to do, ever. I mean, that's a good point, Red.
But it's just
I
what's
don't know.
the alternative? Go into a jail cell. If I'm Karen Reed, it's just it was already because even regardless of the verdict of the trial itself, this was a major win for her regardless. It's she got to sit there and stare these people down as they read these text messages calling her the C word, talking about her flat ass, saying they want her dead.
But then pictures of nudes.
Yeah, all her boyfriends, co-workers and stuff, just completely objectifying. So it's just even though it was declared a mistrial, this is still at least from a community standpoint, is I imagine publicly helped her image at least recover a significant amount, because before this it was just, oh, she killed her boyfriend, and now she gets to see in her community all these people that were treating her so poorly. They're gonna have some level of social repercussion from it, I imagine. I don't know.
Well, you're right. A lot of people are saying that, but is it really a victory for her where she still has the charges hanging over her head? I mean, the prosecution's job was to prove the case, each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt. They didn't do that. So in that sense, sure, it's a victory. But is it really, in that you've got DA Michael Morrissey holding the thing over her head that we're going to retry it, and we're going to retry it in a year? And so...
And what if it's a hung jury again?
Yeah.
We get our third trial.
Can you imagine?
You got your daddy on speed dial.
Yeah, I mean, they can theoretically they can continue to retry the case. You never know with a jury. You and I haven't really talked about this, but those of us who have tried jury trials know that you just don't know. You have no idea what a jury is going to do. They sit there and they watch the case, then they go back in the jury room, and you have no idea. There was as the verdict came out, I was actually driving my car on the interstate, and so I'm listening on the radio. And so the Boston radio station did a poll, and after a while, 72% of their listeners who were paying a lot of attention to this trial said they thought there was a plant from the district attorney's office on the jury.
70%?
72%. 28% thought that the jury was an honest jury. 72% said they thought there was a plant. Now, I'm just reporting what I heard on the radio. I'm not saying
you were saying with the jury and them trying to find the bias and whether they're pro or whatever. I don't know. It's being a part of the jury selection process. But if I'm Mr. Super, I feel very strongly about this, I'm gonna go in. It's just yeah, I don't really know any cops. It's like, meanwhile, my 5 best friends are cops. Like, I don't know. I feel
Well,
like
you know, I think a big part of picking a jury is having some kind of intuition and kind of reading people to see whether what they're saying is like, I don't know if you've ever had this, but somebody says something and you're like, I don't believe them. You know, that kind of thing.
People say that to me all the time.
You know,
Lord, I don't believe you.
well, you
like
know,
entire people whose personality is saying some shit.
yeah, like, or if they're saying yes and they're going, yes, and they're doing this, you know, those kind of things you try to use to weed out people.
I guess that's a good point. You've seen
Well,
enough people, but I mean, we're already seeing that the police department's having all these problems in Massachusetts. How am I going to believe their jury selection department's any better than their police?
Well, sometimes they get jury consultants.
Yeah, and we're going to talk to one in one of our upcoming episodes. We're going to talk to a jury consultant. I was actually friendly with one for a while, but the problem is, you know, a lot of it is psychology, and I hate to say this, but I will anyhow. Psychology is not an exact science like physics. I mean, physics is force and motion and mass, and you put it all together. It's a mathematical formula. Bada bing, bada boom. You can put a satellite in orbit. It's all math, right? But judging human beings is not like that. Somebody comes up in front of you. You have a little card when you go into jury selection. Tell me how they do it in California, but we have a little card, and it just has so much information. You know, what's your occupation? Have you ever had any experience with the courts? I'm trying to think. Have you ever been in law enforcement or have a family member that's law enforcement? Is there any reason why you think that you could not be a fair and impartial juror? You know, it's all general stuff like that. And if people have ulterior motives to get on the jury, or if people just want to sit on the jury for the reasons of wanting to sit on the jury, or if people like law enforcement or hate law enforcement.
Yeah, and in California, there's like a big sign that has like 6 or 7 general questions that the judges ask, and she tells them, look at the sign and be prepared to answer these questions. And then we get a chance to ask questions, the attorneys. But one of the things, it's almost like psychological tests. They, you know, like neuropsych tests and psychological tests, personality tests. They have this embedded scale that is like to determine whether they're over exaggerating their problems, whether they're faking their problems, like the lie scale. And so it's kind of like that when you're picking a jury. You have to ask questions that, you know, for example, on a psychology test, the MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory Test, it says, do you see little green men? Well, some people who want to fake it, they check that off as yes. And so you know that's they're faking. They're, you know. So it's kind of like you need to ask certain questions like that regarding the case or just in general. You kind of have to weave it in somehow. And it is an art, I think, to pick a jury. And that's why there's jury consultants who do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking to one in an upcoming episode. But I was listening to everything you said about the multiphasic test and all of that, and I just, you know, they say that, for example, with the lie detector, which most courts find unacceptable and not admissible, that if you're a pathological liar, you can pass that test, because a pathological liar believes their own lies and they have no compunction about lying. So I have the same concern about these. I'll probably never be able to pick a jury again.
Personality.
But I mean, you know, how do you know that all of those members of the jury are going to play it straight? I mean, especially in a case like the Karen Reed case, not so much there in California, but here in New England, it's just been in the news. It's been in the news constantly. And
there's such a divide, like Lainey said.
And I also think it's foreshadowing too with what's going to happen with the Koberger case, because it's just like now with all the media and stuff like this, I can't really say one way or another why exactly the jury was hung, but I would presume it's the excess of media, the excess of information on the case, the YouTubeosphere, the news, all of that stuff. So I think we are starting to get a view into what's going to happen with Koberger, and it almost makes me wonder if like moments like these, like how you say we have like the jury tests and stuff like that, if we're going to start incorporating more technology to kind of help us get to consensus among people. I don't know how something like that would be implemented, but I feel like the world is trending towards more bias.
Well, you see these groups like on YouTube, these chat groups, and certain people gravitate to certain creators and they chat, and it's kind of like a jury. You want your jury to be on your side, so you want to get them to be able to, it's like, get them to like you, to that sort of thing. But it is difficult. You never know you never know.
No. Now, I really do have a hard time with the verdict. I was thinking about it. I was driving my car. I got back to the office, and as you know, I was procrastinating whether or not we should even do this episode, because I was just I have a hard time with the verdict, having watched a lot of it. What I didn't watch live, I went home that night and I watched. I have a hard time with this judge, with this verdict. I was thinking a lot about it, and I just have a hard time with it. And I scribbled out a list of, just off the top of my head, without even thinking about it, 10 different things that raised reasonable doubt. Now, in my rushing around to get ready for this podcast today, I was only able to write 5 of them down. But here are 5, and you guys can chime in all you want. Number 1, actually, I didn't number them, but we already talked about the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, who's no longer with the Mass State Police. But I mean, he called Karen Reed a whack job, and other comments, including babe. He commented a really disgusting comment that he made regarding a gastrointestinal medical condition that she has. He said she has no ass, and he said he wished that she would kill herself. Now, if that doesn't show bias, I don't know what does. I mean, he said on the stand, "Oh, well, these were regrettable comments. I never should have said it. It was unprofessional." But that does not affect the integrity of the investigation.
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah.
I think it does.
He wished she would kill herself. That isn't unprofessional. Nobody thinks that. Like,
that's what I'm saying. It's just like, who even says that? It's like, the situation's so bad to get to that point that you're saying that.
And we're leaving some of it out. The other thing he said, and I'm leaving the really bad words out, but what he made a comment about Brian Albert, who's also a Boston police officer. He was at that time. He's since retired. But he said, "Yeah, don't worry. He'll be all right. We're not going to give him any SH." So, I mean, the guy, this is just a summary, folks. Comment all you want, but don't comment and say, "Oh, that he said a lot worse than that," because we know. So, yeah, he did. Okay, so we'll leave him to fill out his retirement papers. The Massachusetts State Police Trooper Joe Paul was put on the stand as a collision specialist, and he said that the accident was consistent with a sideswipe accident. And when he said that, I'm scratching my head for 2 reasons. One, the Commonwealth's theory wasn't that it was a sideswipe accident. Their theory was that Karen backed into him and hit him. And the other thing is, he said it was consistent with. Well, words are important, and the duty of the Commonwealth is to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, not that it's consistent with. He said that by the SUV striking O'Keefe's arm, that could cause bodily injuries. Okay.
Not the injuries not those, what looked like bite marks. I mean, that just doesn't sound like that.
No, and they put him out as an accident reconstructionist. Yet, and I don't want to disparage anyone's education, I really don't. But when you're going for the death penalty, he only had an associate's degree. He did not have any degrees in mathematics, physics, engineering. And Yoli, I know you've seen accident reconstruction reports, and no.
Yeah. So this is just a police officer. This is just like somebody who looks at traffic accidents and fills out police reports. It's not an accident reconstructionist.
I agree 100%. And I have news for anyone who won't come right out and say this. The Commonwealth didn't even prove that there was an accident. They didn't. Right. They didn't prove it. The Commonwealth's own witnesses contradicted each other with respect to the timeline. Mass State Police Trooper Nicholas Guarino, who is a digital forensics specialist, said that Karen Reed's phone connected to O'Keefe's Wi-Fi at around 12:35 a.m. on January 29th. That meant that that she would have dropped O'Keefe off and gotten back to his house where she was going to go sleep it off. So she was there by 12:35 a.m., and that directly contradicts Jennifer McCabe's testimony that she observed Reed still outside Brian Albert's home at around 12:45 a.m. So the Commonwealth's own witnesses contradicted each other, and if you tried to make a timeline, I wasn't doing it, physically, graphically, but I'm trying to do it in my head. It made no sense.
It doesn't. And
So
McCabe, Jennifer McCabe, I didn't think that she came across as a very good witness. She came across as very bitter. I don't know. She was arguing and, but I mean, to believe that you would have to believe her testimony rather than the Massachusetts State Police Trooper Garino you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, and if you prepare a witness to be cross-examined, a little bit of righteous indignation is called for. But she was outright aggressively angry. Is the best word for it. And she just, methinks thou dost protest too much. Is that saying that went through my mind the whole time she was on the stand? And I think she was over-prepared by someone to express her disgust at the fact that she even had to lower herself down to being testifying. And so the next thing is that, by the way, the defense experts were not paid by the defense. They all came to 3 of the 4 of them came to them through the federal investigation, which the jury wasn't allowed to know that it was the FBI that's investigating what's going on with this whole case. And Alan Jackson and David Yannetti did an excellent job of telling the jury, did we pay you? No. Did we really prepare you? No. Did we ask you these questions? No. Are you getting paid to be here in court today? No. And one of the experts was Dr. Daniel Wolf, an actual accident reconstructionist who's done 1,000 accident reconstructions. 100 plus of them were pedestrians. Reviewing the file, he found that there was no damage to Reed's Lexus that's consistent with a pedestrian strike. The tail light damage was inconsistent with hitting the body of John O'Keefe. The damage to the back of the Lexus was confined to a 6.5-inch length, making the injuries to O'Keefe's arm inconsistent. The next expert, again, not paid by the defense, was Dr. Marie Russell. She was an interesting witness. She had gone to MIT. Then she became a doctor. She got her medical degree and she became an emergency room physician. And she testified that those injuries across Mr. O'Keefe's arm were caused by a large animal, likely a dog, and not by a tail light. And then the next expert that we're going to discuss is Dr. Frank Sheridan. He's a retired chief medical examiner. He pointed out that O'Keefe's abrasion pattern was inconsistent with the idea of a vehicle collision. He said the injury that O'Keefe had, the head injury, which he went into a lot more detail on, was not consistent with falling onto the grass, maybe hard ground, but it was snowing at that point. And he also said that O'Keefe's blunt force trauma injuries were consistent with a fight, which of course was the defense's kind of allegation the whole time. So that's only 5. I had 10 of them. I just didn't get time to throw them down on the slides here before we went on. But there was
let us know if you want 5 more in the comments.
So there was so much reasonable doubt in this case that I didn't understand that. I don't see a justification for the jury verdict in this case.
It's just the strong divide. I think that no matter what, some people are going to think she's guilty, and no matter what. And it's almost, like you could show them, it's mass denial. Like you could show them proof that she didn't do it, like that somebody else did it, and they will not. There's some people that way, and I don't understand it necessarily, but
it's like a crazy statistic of people who just will not admit that they're wrong, no matter how crazy that they look. Yeah. And maybe they got some of those people on the jury. So yeah, you definitely have a good point.
Yeah.
Well, it goes beyond. I think that was a good point, Red. I think what you're talking about is confirmation bias. Some people just are so deeply entrenched into their own thinking that you could never say anything to them to make them change their mind. But the whole point of serving on a jury is to open your mind. Am I naive or what to think
No. You have
open
to.
their mind and
You
listen
got to
to
weed out those. Yeah.
and only reach a judgment or a verdict based on what you hear. And some of the language that was in the notes, despite our commitment to the jury entrusted in us, we find ourselves deeply divided by fundamental differences in our opinions and state of mind. The divergence of our views are not rooted in a lack of understanding or effort, but deeply held convictions that each of us carry. What does that mean? That you're a member of a cult or a religion that doesn't allow you to judge?
Well, that's strange. It almost sounds like, what do your convictions have to do with looking at the evidence and deciding? Your convictions should be out of it.
I found this troubling. I found this note troubling. I think they just should have written a note that says, "We're a hung jury." Because if you're bringing your deeply held convictions into the jury room, you're not objectively taking in the evidence and basing your judgment solely on the evidence, which is a juror's duty. Right. So I don't know. I just found this troubling.
The held convictions, we don't know what those convictions were for any case, but it just makes me, think about like people being concerned that would theoretically set like a bad precedent for the police or something if she were found not guilty. That's, there could be 101 reasons as to what these convictions are.
And they're deeply held convictions.
Yeah, it's a very specific word. And it's like, what is a deeply held conviction? They went to high school with Karen Reed and they didn't like her. Like, I mean, obviously that wouldn't happen in the jury, but.
And I'm wondering if the judge should have said, your convictions, your deeply held convictions should not play a role in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your religion, your feelings of ethicality or morals, in a death penalty case, which this wasn't. But we've talked about death penalty cases. In a death penalty case, you're told to screen all that stuff out. It's not based on your moral convictions. And we all, I'm sure, have heard and read about people that just have a very strong moral feeling against the death penalty. That's fine. But they shouldn't be sitting on a death penalty jury because the whole idea is what there should be or there shouldn't be. Right, Red?
Yeah, well, not to be that guy, but
that's why I call on
everybody on the internet, like everybody was on the internet during COVID. And for a short period of time, and actually, no, it's still happening right now, people took opinions as like offensive, like if anybody else had a different opinion than them, they were saying that the other person was wrong and that made their opinion wrong. It was a crazy cycle that keeps happening, and I think that it's starting to affect the actual way the world runs.
Or doesn't.
That's a hot take, but
or doesn't run.
Like it.
I think especially because it's like when I see this case, like one of my thoughts that go is just like how much of this jury is going home and going on TikTok, and because they're in Massachusetts, because their like phone is constantly picking up that they're talking Karen Reed, how many people of these like are their feeds specifically skewed one way or another? When they log into TikTok, their phone's been listening to them all day. They know like that this person is probably curious about this situation. It's like we live in an age where we can't even really control the media that gets presented to us a lot of the time. So so it's just like you're doing this case and your phone has decided what what it wants you to believe before you even have had time to make your own opinion.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you all a question. What do you think the chances are now? Michael Morrissey did come out and say, we're going to retry this case. What do you all think that the chances are that they really will retry the case?
I feel like you were saying that because of who it is, that it's high, but I feel like it's so dumb. Like it's just like, I feel like I want to believe the chances are like pretty low, but it sounds like it's going to happen, which like we were talking about is a waste of resources.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you got to think about their options. Like, either they have to tell the entire public that the police department is pretty guilty here, and they're not going to do anything about it because then they're not going to have a law enforcement. Or they're going to have to say this innocent woman is going to jail for an amount of time that she never needed to go to jail for.
Yeah. And then there's the Brian Walsh case. Yola, you might not have heard about it out in California.
I did hear about that. Mm-hmm.
And it it's the same investigators, including Proctor. And in my view, the evidence in that case is so strong. How could you mess it up? I mean, the guy was arguing with his wife. She mysteriously disappeared, and there are those who will remind you, oh, they never found a body. Yeah, but they found blood in the basement. They found a hacksaw. They found all kinds of other evidence, like he was doing Google searches, how long before a body starts to smell, how do you keep a body from smelling, how to dispose of a body. So in my mind, that case is much more clear than the Karen Reed case, and to think that a case like that could be tainted by, investigation that's questionable, that's dangerous as a matter of social policy. I mean, you can be pro-defense all you want, and that's fine, but we need law and order, and we need to know that when there is something like that, we have a competent, credible, unbiased institution that takes care of them and that isn't tainted like this. And there's other cases, which we're going to talk about in a future episode. There's other cases that now, because of this crew, are being looked into.
Yeah.
And we will look at those.
Damn it, Proctor. I ruined it for everyone.
Like, to be
all right. Any final thoughts here? Intern Red, thank you very much for your thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts for us today?
I mean, I hope if it does get retried, her defense is on their game, maybe even a little bit over prepared. Well,
I think that ultimately, I think this trial really favored the defense. I think it's a little silly to retry, but I think when you put it in the perspective of trying to stop a little uprising of people who no longer have any confidence in the structures we have in place, so I think at that point it logically makes sense to try to come to justice and try to get everything right.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if they'll retry it, but they really have some problems with the prosecution in this case.
I guess my question is now can she sue the state?
Not yet.
No.
And it wouldn't, the prosecutor has immunity from any kind of malicious prosecution or anything like that. But the officers could be, a civil rights claim could be brought against the officers. I mean, maybe now, because of what he was saying about her, that he was sexist.
Yeah, that's slanderous. That's really slanderous.
That's why Eddie's holding out. He wants that case.
It's interesting to wonder what's going to happen with the federal investigation. I mean, will we ever know the result of that investigation? Will they sweep it under the rug? What will happen with it? Will we find out? I never really went along with all of the allegations about the frame job. I do think, as I just pointed out, there was a ton of reasonable doubt in the case, much more than the 5 we just went over. We could sit here for an hour and a half, and I could do a million slides, but I never really bought the entire thing about the frame. But I would love to know. I'll reserve my final judgment until we hear what the FBI says, because if what we all suspect was true, that Proctor did in fact make stuff up, he's definitely liable. And I think that heads have already started to roll. But more important than that, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts really needs to take a look at what's going on. And there are a lot of good cops. There are a lot of good state cops. There are a lot of good people in the business. But the ones that are rotten, the state needs to look at this systemically and make some changes.
Yeah.
Anyhow, please subscribe, give us your comments below. We love your comments most of the time. But please let us know what you think, and I hope you all have a great week. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.
And that's that.
That's that.
That's that.
Crazy case.
You know, and we're going to be hearing about it for the next 5 years.
And then if she does get convicted, there'll be appeals and
She's never getting convicted for that. I don't think you can convict her for second degree if you have to prove intent. I don't think there's any way they can prove any intent. The intent is that, like, some people said that she was like a little pissy sometimes. It's like, you know,
yeah, there was
it's
a
just
lot
like,
of
who isn't?
Yeah, there was a lot of prejudicial stuff that came in about her.
Mhm.
Yeah, they brought in all that stuff about she called him a zillion times overnight and she was yelling and screaming, "Oh, you're a pervert, I'm here with your kids, and what's the matter with you? You're with some other woman." I mean, they brought all that in, but I mean, you know, really, couples fight, and, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to kill them.
And it's like also just like even just the fact like that she's acting all crazy screaming is just like, you know, is then you just have to imply that it was without reason. We don't know if he even gave her a reason, you know, to be upset with him sometimes. It's just like, you know, obviously there are people who do kind of blow up for no reason, but at the same time it's just like we don't even know like what he was up to. It's just like she's probably looking at his phone and finding Tinder and like 50 different messages too. We don't know. So it's like to
or
say
finding other things, you know, that
yeah, exactly. It's just like we're seeing that his coworkers and friends are talking about her. His coworkers and his friends are sending messages to each other about her nudes and her butt and her whatever issues she's having. Presumably, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I'd probably go a little crazy too if my boyfriend was hanging out with those people.
Yeah, and I hate to be that guy one more time, but like, I think a lot of people have an unconscious bias when it comes to women being, you know, more
erratic.
Erratic, exactly. And when it comes to a jury, that can definitely stand out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
The deep-seated whatever I forget the exact words, their beliefs, the system,
Convictions,
the conviction was a single guy who had come back to his wife pissed off at him one too many times.
Yeah.
It's like there's no way, she's crazy.
Yeah. They called her a whack job.
They
called her
said she
worse
was
than
a whack
that.
job.
Yeah, they did.
Called her a lot worse than that, and it's like, I mean, come on, I mean, it just shows that the guy's not that bright, because you know everybody knows that this stuff is recorded these days. I mean, this was only 2 years ago. I mean, if it was 20 years ago, sure, I guess that's how people talked. But you know, with cell phones and everything else, I mean, and he actually, you know, stuff that he wrote down in texts to his friends. I mean, as a police officer, as a police trooper, as an investigator, he has to have known that this stuff is searchable.
They're
And
like notes. They're like notes to his investigation. That's how I look at him.
Yeah.
Even at any desktops, seriously, it's just like everybody, not everybody watching here, but I'm sure there's a significant amount of our demographic who has to use like Microsoft Teams or whatever, or is like whatever group chatting you're using for your job. Everybody watching does not have this going on in their group chat. When people have like jobs that they feel like comfortable and that they're friends with their coworkers and their bosses, that's the outlier. Like, who is talking to their coworkers like that?
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah.
All right. So
Okay.
I think I'm going to cut it off because we're almost at an hour and this was a great episode. I think I want to save it for the next one. So let me know any ideas you guys have.
Okay.
End recording. End.